Thank you very much, Cyril. That's very kind of you. And you might be kind of worried that the worst kind of artist is someone who has a doctorate in drawing. And don't be scared. Don't be scared by that. I'm here to talk to you about what drawing might be. And we've just had Ingo's presentation, which is fantastic, looking at the line, walking across the page. I'm interested in what that might be and how that could express some thinking, how we think through drawing, how we make drawing, and how we might think with the hand, and how the hand might be actually a really important part of how we think in the world. So the intuitive hand, drawing as tacit knowledge, knowledge that is inside us. Okay. I make you draw while we do this, because as I'm talking about these things, you are going to be making the drawing that illustrates the talk, actually. So we're going to do that. I'm going to pass these out. A little card, a nice little card that you can draw on. And I'm going to ask you to doodle. Now, doodles might seem very unimportant kind of drawings that maybe you do when you're on the phone and you're kind of just bored, but actually doodles are really important drawings that I call ideational drawings or idea drawings. And out of that, sometimes you can solve problems. If you're on the telephone, maybe you're speaking to your, the tax man on the phone, and you draw and you doodle and you solve the problem of the conversation, sometimes with the act of drawing. So anyway, we're going to pass these out. So if you pass them along the line there. And don't worry, I'm not going to look at them and critique them at the end, so don't worry. No critiques. So first, the very important thing is we need to make a little shape in the middle, because otherwise you're going to start from the edge. You're going to start doodling from the edge. I want you to make, in the middle of the card, a shape. It can just be very simple, triangle, or a square, or a circle, anything you like, but just a simple shape in the middle of the card, and that's where you're going to start from. Okay? Everyone done that? Good, okay. Now I want you to give your shape to the person next to you. So you have somebody else's shape to start from, yeah? So while I'm talking, for the first part of the talk, I just want you just to forget about drawing. Just move the pen around, just like you're listening to me on the telephone. Just no thinking. Just moving your pen around. Maybe you're a bit bored. Maybe you hear something interesting. Maybe you move the pen around a little bit. Make some. I don't mind. Whatever you do it. Okay. So this is your doodle pad. Because the kind of drawing we're talking about today is very close to this kind of drawing. We've seen Ingo's work, which is very perspectival, very representational, fantastic work that is describing a city. And I suppose this talk is about describing a kind of drawing that comes out of an inner landscape, that comes out of somewhere inside your unconscious. And actually, we're going to be looking in this talk about where those ideas might come from. Okay, so I've had a bit of an introduction. So I lecture in the UK, leading a painting, drawing and printmaking degree in Plymouth. So I'm an artist, drawing artist. Sometimes, Ingo said you were a draftsman, and I've tried to use that word in English, but it means something else. If I say I'm a draftsman, everyone thinks I'm an architectural draftsman. So I can't use that word. So I have to use a word like drawer, which sounds really awkward. A drawer, like you keep your socks in, maybe, A drawer, what has that word? So it's being a drawing artist, that's the best description, is what I've kind of come down to. So various things, and just finished my practice-led PhD. And if you're going to do a PhD, it doesn't necessarily make you a better artist, it just makes you a better researcher, actually. So various things that I'm interested in. I'm interested in how to teach this as well as how to practice it. So the teaching and the practice of drawing are very close for me, very intertwined. So the images that we'll see through this talk will be of student work from my students and others, and the kind of things that I get them to do. And often the students complain that they spend most of the first year blindfolded or with their legs tied together, or being made to draw with the wrong hand, or being made to draw without looking or without looking at the paper. And I spend a lot of time disrupting student drawing. As an example of a piece of work that I had showing in Lausanne a little while ago, Specular. Okay, so very much the kind of drawing that, this is doesn't come out very well. The kind of drawing we're thinking about is this kind of drawing. So Joseph Beuys, who's that German artist who's died in about 1986, I think. A very famous shaman, almost, for a contemporary artist in Germany and internationally. He spent about 40 years just drawing this thing he called the secret block for the secret person in Ireland. He spent 40 years actually thinking through drawing before he really started to make any work. And so the kind of drawing that actually maybe you're doodling right now, and maybe Beuys was thinking about in between the 1930s and 1950s, actually these kind of drawings that start to, this is very bad reproduction and you need to see them, start to bring ideas up. So drawing as a way of generating ideas. So Paul Klee says, intuition is still a good thing. There is plenty of room for exact research, but there is no substitute for intuition. So there's lots of terms flying around now. We've got kind of drawing, we've got tacit intelligence, we've got intuition. What do we mean by all this? How does this all fit together? And how does the practice of drawing fit with a design education, where ideas come from, for a building, for a teapot, for a room, for clothing, for a typeface, come first of all from this act of putting a mark on the paper, this thinking. How can drawing also relate to you and to me? So I'm coming as a drawing artist, come to an architecture school, really to talk to you on a kind of level playing field. Fundamentally, we all draw first, whether that's on a computer or on a piece of paper, whatever it is. We all draw first. So that you might reflect that perhaps drawing is some kind of fundamental human condition. And I think you'd be right. That drawing is an ancient form, more ancient than we know. It is thousands and thousands and thousands of years old, and actually falls somewhere before writing. That before man writes, man makes a mark to describe a thought to another person. It's what marks us out from other animals who do not draw. We are drawing animals. We are drawing animals. That's quite extraordinary. It marks us out. It is our birthright as human beings to draw. So people who say, hey, I can't draw, I don't know how to draw, are actually saying things like, I can't speak, I can't write, I can't walk. All those things which we consider in society to be disabilities, whatever. The ability to draw is actually your birthright. And in various places in the UK, particularly, drawing is very badly taught through school. People have drawing kicked out of them at school. They're not allowed to draw, or they're taught to draw in a very awkward way, which leads them to give up. And then by the time they leave school, they say, I can't draw. Drawing is not my thing. Breathing is not my thing. They might as well say breathing is not my thing. Thinking is not my thing. So I get very angry and very, and wave my hands around a lot about, well, actually drawing is everyone's birthright. So I talk to my students about that. So it's a unique human ability. And Boyce here, the man with the blackboard, some of you might be familiar with him. So drawing is the first visible form in his work. So he's talking about it as being the form of the thought, and it's the changing point from the invisible to the visible. So it's a point where thought, the thinking, actually achieves some kind of form in the world. It's almost magical. So if drawing is the closest thing to thinking, which I would argue it is, that drawing is the closest thing to thinking on the page. We have a thought, we can make a mark. Even on the street, someone says, how do you get to the post office? You have an envelope, you go, you like that down there, and then you turn left, and then there's the post office. Yeah? You gesture in the world, and you make a drawing even on the street, and maybe even the map that Cyril did me for getting here today was a kind of one of those drawing maps. It expresses a thought. So there are there's various theory, a lot of thinkers talking about this this motion of the hand, if you like, this motion of the hand, this gesture. A being who can speak, that is, think, can have hands and can handily achieve works of handicraft. Okay, so that's Heidegger. I'm not going to do too much Heidegger, don't worry. But sometimes he comes up with some good sentences. What he's saying there is actually, he's asking the question, what came first, the hand or the thinking? Maybe we developed hands because we can think. And we need hands in order to move and to gesture, to make marks, because we are thinking animals. And actually that was the way round that it developed. And not that we had hands first and then we found it useful to think. But he's saying, well, what about it being the other way around? Actually, that in the same way that we develop eyes, because we, in some ways, vision becomes part of our thinking, the eyes develop because of that. So maybe it was the hands that came second. And if you think about how much we use our hands in our daily lives, I'm standing here waving my hands around, jazz hands. Everyone, when they're describing things, are also describing how big and how long and how smooth, and they're moving their hands around like this when they're talking. And we gesture with our hands to describe thinking. This gesture is also part of the instinct to draw. So that gesture becomes, on the page, the line. It is very close to it, which is why I say everyone can draw, because everyone can move their hands. We have that ability. So what we hold in our hands, we hold the Francis Bacon, not the painter, the earlier one. He talks about the noise of the infinite. We make sense of the noise of the infinite by holding that which is near in the finite place of the hand. We hold our worlds in our hands, becomes safe, becomes a place. To grasp something is to know it. If I grasp the edge of the table, I grasp your hand, I know you. Grasping the hand, greeting, reaching out, to know something. We touch, and actually touch is the first sense that we have as human beings. When we're born, we can't see, our eyes are gummed up, we can't speak. We can barely hear, where our ears are gummed up, but we can touch. And touch is the primal sense of the human being, much more than vision, much more than eyes. It is about the sense of touch. And touch and gesture and drawing are all, again, very closely linked. We touch the page with our mark, with our pen. Also, it's a way of aligning ourselves in the world. I know where I am right now because I know there's a wall behind me. You're in front of me. On this side, I have a table. And nothing kind of over there. I'm aligning myself in the world as a human being, up, down, left, right, forward, back. So touch, where I am in the world, all these things. So the spatial aspect of that. So the hand and drawing establishes place. It can also destabilize as well, because a drawing can, in a way, destabilize our sense of where we are and can tip us into the unknowing. So Deleuze is saying drawing is the altogether other of our invention, the surprise, the not yet possible in the history of the spaces in which we find ourselves. So it's pure thinking erupting into the spaces, making new thinking. And we catalyse the potential to produce again and again and differently, to produce what is not presently constituted in the course of our history. So it is actually the place where new thinking can come from. New thinking, which here in the academy, this is the academy, the university, the kind of thinking that's preferenced here, is a very particular kind of rational thinking. And actually what drawing does, it looks at a different kind of thinking, a different kind of knowledge, which is much more about potential. So if you like, the potentia, what Deleuze calls potentia, which is this potential to produce again and differently, what might be. Whereas the academy, where we are right now, and the university and the people around us, they valorize the already known, the learning of the already known. That is the kind of that stable form. So how we might define a drawing actually by something that, and Walter Benjamin did this, he defined drawing as being a page on which lines were, which did not cover the page entirely, but allowed the whiteness of the support or the paper to shine through. And as soon as an image became entirely blocked in, it became a painting. So he kind of almost argued that a drawing was defined by its fragmentary nature, that it was a meshwork of lines through which you could see nothing. Very complex sign. Lines to completely cover the background, it would cease to be a drawing, according to Benjamin. So drawing deals with fragmentation, while painting is covering it or making it whole. John Berger also talks about, who's another writer who talks a lot about drawing, lives in the south of France now, I think. He talks about drawing as a verb. He's not even talking about it as being an act of putting pencil to paper, but more about it being a verb, like in a vocabulary, in a language. So the verb speaks in different tenses, like language does. So drawing that might relate to observation, idea, communication, memory, all these different tenses of drawing are all operating. So drawing plays with appearance, it oscillates between seeing, thinking, remembering and imagining, controlling and being controlled as the image emerges. During the course of its making. So here we have the academy as well in action. So this is about representation. This is not necessarily the kind of drawing we're talking about now. You're doodling. These guys aren't doodling. They're spending years actually trying to represent the model, trying to represent the life model through observation. But it's the action in the world of mark making and what Derrida calls the puissance of drawing, that underlying puissance, potency of drawing. So these drawings here, for instance, are made by students who I make them look at each other and not look at the paper, and they're not allowed to take their pen off while they're looking at each other. So they kind of like this, they're looking at each other and they're following the contour of their faces with the end of their pen, and they can't take their pencil off. It takes a few minutes. Some of them use them as their Facebook profiles in the end. They have this kind of lots of laughing, because you're laughing now, but when you imagine doing it, it's very funny. So they kind of, everything slips and slides and the spectacles fall off and all that kind of thing. Okay, two things we need to think about. Because we're talking about intuition, we need to think about, first, about creativity. And I'm going to just take you through very quickly how we might start thinking about creativity. That's a kind of funny word. That's actually a word in the world which is it's almost dangerous. It's like the word spirituality. Creativity. Funny word. In the UK, certainly, you can't really talk about creativity in the art and design in the university, because it's something else. It's something that happens in business, actually, more than in art and design, which is a very strange thing. I'm interested when things are awkward like that, when you can't speak them. I'm interested in why, because I think there's art in there somewhere. There's art. So we're thinking about creativity as a seed, if you like, intuition is the seed of creativity. We're going to trying to get back to drawing right now. We're going to think about creativity and try and move back towards drawing and think about intuition as being the seed of creativity. Before we do that, we're going to do something with your drawings now. Okay? So just stop doodling. What we're going to do now, I'm going to ask you to swap your doodle with somebody else. Oh no! You're going to swap your doodle with somebody else. And now I want you to do something slightly different. Okay, swap the doodles and then we'll... It's a very personal thing. It feels a little bit like a wrench, doesn't it? Oh, I'm giving my doodle to somebody else. Okay. So now look at your doodle that you have. Crazy thing that it is. It's like that's little vision into someone's head, right? This little thinking thought that somebody else thought that. Isn't that amazing? Isn't it wonderful? A wonderful thing. Very rich. Okay. So we're going to move this on a little bit further into a different level. Okay. So you're going to use this doodle that you have in front of you as the first step in creating a tool for yourself that's going to solve a problem in your life. Okay? So I want you to think about a problem you've got in your life. It could be, I'm always late for lectures. I can never find the money in my pocket for the tea. I always drive my car badly. Doesn't matter what it is. You don't have to make it personal. You can do whatever you like. You don't have to say what it is. Okay? It's a little problem you might have in your life. I always have my hair sticks up in the morning. Yeah? Think of a psychological problem or a problem you have in your life. And you're going to make this doodle into a tool that's going to solve that problem. Does everyone understand? Yeah, you have a problem in your life, and this drawing, you're going to make it into, you're going to adapt this into a tool to solve the problem. Yeah? Okay? Yeah? Okay. All right, where you go. Same thing, just doodle. Doodle around the edge of the doodle, make it into a tool to solve a problem. This is again about you're modelling this way of drawing. You're being quite intuitive. The drawing you've got is very intuitive. And now we're going to make this useful, make this doodle useful.
Can you say the next step as well?
The next step after that? No, there isn't. After this, we have a critique. No. There isn't. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so we need to think about creativity because we need to think about intuition. What is this intuitive drawing, intuitive hand thing? So creativity, a definition, ability to generate innovative ideas and manifest them in the world. So you start off as an architect, you make a drawing on a computer or on a piece of paper, and then your job is to manifest that in the world. So that's creativity, and it's original thinking and production. Okay, so that's really basically what we're talking about. Intuition is a slightly more slippery thing than that. It's an ability to follow and respond to the ebb and flow of materials to affect a change. So somehow you have to be alert to opportunities. Intuition means that you grab out at something that comes up. You follow through. It seems like intuition is like a flow of water almost. Okay, so this is my students. Yeah, so they're poor people. They just get blindfolded. This is a project I call. This is called human kite flying. Okay, so you see there are sweets on the floor here, and they have partners, and they're blindfold and string, and their partners have to fly themselves across the room and find the suite. It's about an exercise in collaboration, about the group, okay? Human kite flying. See, some of them are smiling, so it's okay. So I think there's quite a lot of different ways of thinking about creativity, but I think there's three that are kind of useful. Creative strategies model, cognitive style theory, and this one, which I think is most useful, systems or confluent approach. Don't worry, this is going to go back to drawing, so I need to cover this first. So creative strategies model. This is the one that you probably know. When you're first a student, somebody talks to you about creativity, they might start talking to you about how you might become more creative or get some more ideas together. And it's a step. Inspiration, clarification, evaluation, distillation, incubation, perspiration. Okay, this is like it's a step model of creativity. You put one thing into one side of the machine, it goes through a series of steps, and out the other end pops an original idea. Fantastic. Why don't we buy into this? This is great. Unfortunately, this is a very mechanistic way of looking at creativity, and I think it's probably, it tunes into the university, to the academy, are very keen on teaching that way because it's kind of manageable. Another way of thinking about it is cognitive styles. So this is what kind of person you are. So this is, on one end of the scale, we have someone who is an adapter. On the other end, like you're adapting these doodles. One side is the adapter. On the other end of the spectrum is the innovator. So the adapter is very good at making sense of things that already exist in the world. Like an adapter will take a car and maybe just slightly adjust it so it works a bit better. On the other end of the spectrum, the innovator will invent an entirely new kind of transport that has never existed before. So this cognitive style theory, there's a kind of spectrum you may find, if you reflect yourselves, falling on somewhere between adapter and innovator. Kind of useful way of thinking about creativity. But by far the most useful way of thinking about it is this systems approach. Now that sounds even more mechanistic than the other one. But what this is talking about is that creativity is not what is creativity, but where is creativity. So the systems theory talks about the creative act being an interaction between a field, a domain, and an individual. So we're in a university, we're part of a field of practice. Outside of the university here we have the domain of architecture, for instance. These are the people who are going to give you a job later, the domain. And the field in the university is taken up by your tutors, by other members of staff, by your peers and so forth. And so the systems approach to creativity actually talks about this as being a field of forces. And creativity is where is creativity in this. Starts to be a place where the field recognizes an original thought and holds it. So we think about the confluent or systems approach, creativity, hold that thought for a moment, because that's actually much more intuitive. Some more crazy drawings. So Deleuze and Guattari, 1,000 Plateaus, maybe some of you read that, very interesting, not the whole thing, it's very thick, use it as a doorstop. So when we're talking about this flow, this way of thinking about intuition that ebbs and flows, it is matter in movement, in flux, in variation. So it can only be followed. Actually, very much like a drawing that moves, we follow the line. We follow the lines, and Ingo's drawing, the line flows and ebbs and flows, and we follow it. And actually we follow, when we look at a drawing of somebody else's drawing, we spend a lot of time following the gesture. If you imagine the person moving their hands, we follow the gesture of the person making the drawing. The gesture, again, like I'm speaking to you, this gesture becomes the trace on the page. So we're following that ebb and flow. So Deleuze and Guattari talk about people who follow the flow are wayfarers, whose task is to enter the grain of the world's becoming and bend it to an evolving purpose. There is an intuition in action. So someone who takes a piece of clay will flow with the clay, the grain of it, as it moves. You can take a knife and you can cut through it and make something, but actually by following the grain of the material, or the grain of the wood or the clay, you start to follow the ebb and flow of the world. This is, if you like, a way of pursuing that systems theory of creativity, the seed of that. Always keep moving the notes. Okay. Okay, let's go back for a minute. I'm going to introduce you a way of thinking about intuition now, which goes back 1,000 years to the Greek guys, those very clever Greek guys, particularly Aristotle. And he came up with a way of thinking about creativity and intuition, which relates to the drawing that we're thinking about. And some of you might have come across this already, but don't worry, this is quite easy. You do it all the time. Techne, metis, and kairos. Okay, these are great heavy Greek words. Basically, it's this, okay? It's the way that enables a tennis player, or someone with an arrow, or someone hitting a nail in with their hand, or someone riding a bicycle, or any of the number of things that you do every single day to be able to do well. This technique, metis and kairos, enables that to happen. And it's a way of thinking about how we go about things in the world, including drawing, including making clay pots, but also doing very simple things, how that can work. More happy students. Okay, so techne. Aristotle and other people, and this is something that has been discussed for another next 1,000 years after they came up with it. There's another 1,000 years of discussion about this. It is a way of, yes, it is. It sounds like technical knowledge. It sounds like the technique, doesn't it? Techne. But actually, it's actually much more reactive than that. It's a way of thinking about how we do something. It's a craft-like knowledge, but it's actually really quite insurgent. Lots of this ways of thinking that Aristotle thought about creativity, how we make things, sounds much more like an urban guerrilla in the jungle, someone, a fighter almost, someone who is seeking opportunity, who's got an enemy almost. So techne is insurgent, is subversive, a disruptive way of thinking about tactical knowledge, about seeking things. It's almost like you kind of got camouflage on and you're ready to shoot it out of the sky. It responds to situations. It's the art of knowing when. It's the art of knowing when. Metis is a form of intelligence which we have, which is a cunning. It's the cunning intelligence, which means that we just dart out of the way just in time while the fox runs past and then we can shoot it. So metis is flair, it's wisdom, forethought, subtlety of mind, and opportunism. So it's a type of intelligence and thought, a way of knowing implies a complex but very coherent body of mental attitudes and intellectual behaviour, which combine their flair and wisdom and so forth, apply to situations which are transient, shifting, disconcerting, ambiguous. These are kind of situations where you don't quite know what's happening. You might think about it sailing a boat, maybe. Sailing a boat, you're in a sea, and the wind is moving one way and the water moves another, and the boat heels over and the sail moves, and you just know which way to move it to make the boat move. So it's that kind of way of that situation, that's a very ambiguous situation, knowing exactly when to act. So it's a passing instant when an opening appears which must be driven through with force if it is to succeed. Okay, kairos is the time. This is the time taken to do the thing, the time taken to fire the arrow, to sail the boat. This is curious time. It's not chronos, it's not chronological time, it's not the time of this. It is the time taken. It's a kind of quite mysterious time, actually. The time taken to make the act. Okay. So I want some volunteers in the audience. Okay. You can volunteer. No, I'm not. Okay, I'm going to screw this up. Screw it into a ball. Okay. Okay, this is going to be 3 people. You've always wanted to do this, okay? So here I am. I'm the target, okay? I am the target. So screw it up into a ball, okay? So you need to stand up maybe. And this is the techne, metis, and kairos in action, okay? The moment of release and hitting, okay? So aim for the head. Yeah, hard, yeah. Okay, fantastic. You've always wanted to do that. So that's demonstration of every day we do that to close the car door, throw the cricket ball. This is intuition in action. It's also a gesture in the world, action at a distance, drawing. We draw in the world with our hands. Okay. How am I doing? So, just to recap, techne is a tactical practice that's capable of setting up the conditions where kairos, the time of opportunity, might arise, and in knowing how and when to act in response. So we work in the world with our intuition, we work in the world through drawing and our gesture, our birthright as human beings. Remember, we were born as primeval beings almost, able to do this. This is our birthright, our thing that marks us out from the animals. Something else important to realize here is that often we consider the creation of things to be somehow a making. So as I make a pot out of clay, I get the clay and the pot doesn't exist, and I have the clay and I kind of put enough clay together and hey, I have a pot in the end. But actually, Heidegger again says, actually it's not like that. It's actually the person who is reacting to the ebb and flow of the world, the grain of the world, reveals the pot inside the clay. It's already there. And your job, as the maker, is to uncover the potential of the pot inside the material. In the same way we can look at the surface of the paper that you're doodling on right now as a surface of infinite potential. And you uncover the surface and find inside it the drawing that's going to be there. It's not you acting on the paper, you are clearing away the noise, if you like, of the paper, and the drawing rises up. If you want to experiment, a good way of experimenting with that, and I do that with some of the students, is that we take a piece of paper and we cover it with charcoal, completely black. And I give them a rubber, eraser, to draw with. And they rub away and make the drawing from a field of black. And the drawing appears like a photograph of developing in a tank in the darkroom. It's revealing. Actually, Heidegger talks about the silver and how the silver chalice, inside the silver chalice, inside the silver there is a potential of this chalice. Anyway, that's Heidegger talking. Think about clay maybe a bit more. So Dreyfus and Dorrance talking about the task of the craftsman is not to generate the meaning, but to cultivate himself the skill for discerning the meanings that are already there. So that's kind of a scary thought, isn't it? Maybe that all this stuff's already there, and actually our job is to uncover it as artists and designers. We uncover this stuff. It's kind of these things are already in the world already. Maybe that sounds a bit esoteric, perhaps. Maybe it takes away some of the power of the artist. Actually, we're uncovering. They do spend a lot of time blindfold. Okay, last thing to think about, and nearly with the psychological tools to keep you drawing, hopefully. So Bourdieu talks about this idea of intuition as being somehow embodied. So I'm talking about the thinking hand and the hand that thinks. So take my head away, my hand almost will twitch, almost like I have a think itself. The drawing that you make is almost the hand thinking on the paper. So it's an embodied knowledge, not the knowledge here, not potestas, the knowledge of the university that's here. It's almost comes from here, the art brain, the gut brain. Art comes and drawing comes from the guts, yeah, a feeling actually. And that's embodied thinking. That's knowledge that's in our bodies. And that's what drawing is doing, if you like. When we talk about drawing being an act of thinking, it's coming from the body. It's not something that one has, that you own. It's something that you are. You are this knowledge. You express it almost in the way that you walk down a road, expressing the way you think. So Borgia is talking about this. The only way you can get to do your arrow or throwing the ball or making the drawing is that inside you is this intuition that already exists, this tacit knowledge. Use that word now, the tacit knowledge that's inside you. That actually means that you can start to pursue and drive home the opportunities, techne, metis and kairos. You can drive opportunity home at the exact moment when it's needed. So drawing uses intuition to describe the mercurial drawn line as it yields to whim and when to reassert control, when to be attentive to variables, when to be prepared for the unexpected. The end of the line is almost like a kind of a snake, the head of a snake with no eyes. You're never quite sure where it's going to move, and as a drawing artist, you're attentive to which way it flows backwards and forwards. Can we learn intuition? Can you learn it? Maybe we can if we think about this idea of being trained in the art of inquiry, sharpening our powers of observation, and being observant, being hunters, being observant and grasping and noticing opportunities for yourself in your practice, in the drawing that you're making right now. Those moments, if you like, can hold intuition. Okay. This is an example of a drawing that was done by a student doodling. So I'm just going to give you some examples so you can feel bad about the ones you're doing, yeah? So here's some examples. These are psychological tools, yeah, that they made in response to the same set of questions. Okay, I'm going to stop talking now. Phew. And invite questions. But while we're doing that, I think while we're even thinking about questions, because everyone sits there and can't think of a question, what I'd really like to do is, as long as it's okay with you, I'd like to take our cards and I'd like to make a kind of big square, big grid on the floor over there, and we're just going to take a look at each other's, yeah, because it's really interesting what's happened. I don't know if everyone's okay with that. Can we get up? Is that all right? Let's get up and let's put them all on the floor over here. Let's just grid them up and have a little kind of little look. It's down on the floor. First one down. Fantastic. I think some people are hiding them. But look at this. These are drawings of psychological tools to solve some kind of problem in someone's life. Whatever we don't know what that is. What could it be? Even just thinking about what the problem could be is interesting. And this has come out of you as the audience, listening to a talk about drawing and intuition and the thinking hand. And here is an evocation of that thought back into the drawing that you've made at the end of the session. Okay? So we've modeled it back to you. So you've made part of it work. Okay? And these are drawings which are ideational drawings. They're drawings that are new things in the world. This is new stuff. Unique, new, original thinking about some kind of weird psychological tool to make, whatever it is. I can't make out what's going on. Maybe there's something about being late, about being scared about spiders. I think maybe there's a spider in there. Do you think maybe that's a spider? Yeah. So they represent new knowledge in the world, and how this relates to your practice as architects. Maybe it's the importance of drawing with the hand, actually. The importance of drawing with the hand, I think, as opposed to the computer-aided design. process. That these produce new forms which can go into design. Okay, I'm going to stop. Anyone who got some questions, maybe?
As colleagues, PhD students, can we use this intuition also as a research method?
Yeah, and actually drawing is really useful because it's also an outcome of research, but it's also of itself a means of research. So it's a way you can pursue your research using drawing as a methodology, but also as an outcome as well. So if that's thinking and research is qualified by being thinking, then if drawing is thinking, then drawing can be research by the same token. There's a lot of problem with practice-led research. Research led by drawing or painting. These things, how do these things become accepted in a university? How does that become an object of research in the university? This is a problem for the university to accept that. In fact, often you have to write about it, and the university likes the writing better than this. They accept the writing more. I had an exhibition and had to write a thesis, and there was no way the university were going to knock back my drawing research. It was always the writing they could qualify somehow. So there's always a problem between, it's been around for 10 or 15 years now, this practice-led research, and there's still a problem in how it sits in the university.
Yeah, I find it very difficult to gauge how to use intuition. Where does that really come into the whole thing? Because everybody has it very specifically, very individually, and how can that place within a given that is given by a university or prescriptions or
Yes.
whatever you have to research on. Intuition is something very personal and individual.
Yes, and that's why I've tried to unpack it, I suppose, in the talk, trying to unpack it through thinking about creativity, tacit knowledge, and so forth, and applying it to drawing, because it seems very personal. It's like how you hit a nail in with a hammer, or how you ride a bicycle. How is that anything to do with how I think in the university? Well, we are in a place which is values that very mechanistic. It values potestas rather than potentia. Values the thing that's already set out already. It's almost like a difference between convergent and divergent thinking. So in some ways, like if you had a medical student, okay, the last thing you want is a medical student who's creative. Whoa, bad news! Or an airline pilot who's creative. No! We want those guys to have convergent thinking and to think about the things that already exist in the world that help them to do the job. Okay, we as designers and artists, we have to show divergent thinking. We have to take what's already happened and divert from that to make new knowledge. That is our job, is to create original thought in the world. So I would say intuition is, here we have it, this is a kind of example of intuition in action. That is a way of creating new knowledge in the world that is essential, actually, in our discipline in the university. We are kind of strange beasts, actually, in the university. We're strange people because we're kind of convergent and divergent at the same time. We're kind of switching between the two. Okay, well done, everybody. Thank you for being good sports, and and you can take them back, take them home as a souvenir of Archizoom. Thank you.